Fellow Toastmasters, I had a dream. About 3 to 4 years ago, I went to sleep. Didn't quite wake up. I wake up later. But when I was going to sleep, I had this vision. And in this vision, I was up on about the 6th level of a skyscraper, and there was a balcony that was there. And this gentleman who was right next to me had his cap blow up. This big wind came up, the cap blew off, and he went to go grab the cap and he fell off the balcony, 6 stories high. And I ran over to the balcony to see him squash against the bottom. And instead, this big wind got bigger as he reached the ground, and it scooped him up so that he ended up landing in a run instead of being flattened against the pavement below. And I turned to the crowd that was next to me and said, "That was God. Did you just see that miracle? He should have been squashed, and instead the wind came up and saved this guy." And they looked at me and said, "That wasn't God. You're full of it. There is no thing such as God. That was just a freak accident of the wind. It can happen." And I said, "No, it wasn't. It was God." And they turned away and ridiculed me and treated me like I was crazy. And then off, and from a cloud, came this figure flying in like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he comes and he flies in and grabs this guy who had managed to get his cap on the ground and scoop him up and bring him back up and place him on the balcony right in front of me. And I'm saying, "I told you it was God. Here he is. Look, everybody. He just scooped that guy up. He's coming to place him right on the balcony." And people took one quick look at him, and then they cast their eyes down on the floor. And they looked mortified and embarrassed. And they couldn't look at him. They did not want to look at what was obviously God standing in front of them, having flown in to rescue this guy and bring him back up to the balcony. And meanwhile, I'm saying, "There he is, there he is. It's proof. I told you." I can't keep it in. "I told you so, I told you so." It's not exactly a Christian sentiment, but that's what I was saying. And then God stopped looking at the crowd that had their eyes fastened on the ground and looked at me, and I was filled with this overwhelming emotion that I have never felt before. And it was so powerful, it welled up inside me, and it caused me to wake up. It was so powerful. And it wasn't until a couple hours of being up that night, having been awake, that I figured out that's what peace is. I've never felt it. It was overwhelming. It was wonderful. And I've only had small smidgens of that feeling ever since. It was a completely new emotion for me. I am going to relate this dream of mine in a couple different ways as part of a discussion that I had with my son when he was getting confirmed. He hasn't gotten confirmed yet. In our family, we encourage a lot of discussions, and he has been discussing why he doesn't want to be confirmed, and I have been trying to convince him that it's the right thing for him. And why is this important? Well, my son is a millennial, and I have some statistics. The millennials are a lot less likely to be religiously affiliated, and as a result, according to Pew Research, between the years of 2007 and 2014, so over 7 years, the percentage of our society that's religiously affiliated has gone from 83% to 77%. In the space of 7 years, 6.9% of our society no longer is affiliated with any religion. That's 1% per year. That's pretty dramatic. For those who are unaffiliated, the percentage who believe in God amongst the unaffiliated has gone in that same 7-year period from 70% to 61%. 9% of our society in 7 years now no longer even believes in God if they're not going to church. The percentage who pray daily has gone from 58% to 55%. The percent who go and attend services at least monthly has gone from 54% to 50%. In a 7-year period of time, there's been a dramatic decrease in people's desire to even be affiliated with a religion. And that's despite a lot of Catholics coming in from South America and Mexico that could have made those numbers even worse if they weren't coming up. As an additional statistic, in the 1950s, 3 to 4% of the United States were Jewish. Today it's 1.8%. In a period of 70 years, they've been cut in half. So why do you care? Well, as George Washington said, if you take away religion, morality follows. Religion and morality are intimately mixed. We recently had mass shootings in our schools because we've gotten God out of our schools. In the 70s, they decided we could no longer have Bible study in our schools. You couldn't have prayers in our schools. Is there a correlation? That's up for you guys to decide. That could be a whole separate speech. But that is one reason why we should be concerned about this. So, in addition to my son's confirmation, which is important to me, he's come up and said, well, Dad, what do you think about Karl Marx? He said that religion is the opiate of the masses. What do you think about that? And I said, well, let's take one look in the Bible at where that wasn't the case. Jesus actually got angry at those who were in the temple who were exchanging money, because you had to pay in religious currency for your tithing. And the money changers were charging an exorbitant rate to take the other currency and change it into Jewish currency. And so what did Jesus do? He took all those tables of money, he threw them on the floor, he fashioned a whip, and he whipped those people. Now, a lot of the people who go around talking about how Jesus is all filled with love like to forget about that story. But Jesus was not the tolerant, guy who believed in you can do anything that he's portrayed as. This is where he got mad at people who were taking advantage of those who wanted to pay their taxes to the church. Because the church used to collect those taxes and use it for welfare. They didn't have the big welfare apparatus that we have in today's society. So was that Jesus being an opiate of the masses, convincing people that they should just live with injustice, that they shouldn't fight it? No, that's a perfect example of him fighting against injustice. Now, Karl Marx would say, well, in many ways, religion is a crutch. And people who use religion are using it because they just don't have the other psychological capabilities to handle what it is that they're being faced with. I think that metaphor is pretty damaging because it makes people who have religion look to be disabled or having a problem. Whereas I think most people who go to church get that religious teaching and strengthening as like armor. It helps them to fight against temptation. It helps them to fight against evil. It helps them to go out into the world and make a difference. And there's plenty of people who are motivated by the religion to donate to the church, and that money ends up going to the poor. It ends up going to education. It ends up going to hospitals. It ends up going in a lot of ways that benefit our society. So to say that that's a crutch rather than armor to help them face the problems that and the sins and the choices that they make in life, I think is not fair to those who actually go and do that. So then, if that isn't enough, my son comes to me and you can say, well, I don't, does he really come up with this stuff? Yes, he does. I'm blessed. So he comes up to me and says, well, Freud says God is an illusion and that it interferes with reason and science. Wow. Wow. This is just amazing. It just gets better and better, doesn't it? So then I have to go to the internet and I have to come and find all this stuff to defend my faith. And I find out that as of the year 2017, 892 Nobel Prizes have been given out. 892. Now, who are some of the strongest faith people, the ones who take their faith the most seriously? I would say Jews happen to take their faith very, very seriously. And what percentage of those Nobel Prizes do you think have been earned by Jewish scientists, Jewish humanitarians? 22.5%. A quarter of those Nobel Prizes have been won by the Jewish faith. And yet what percentage of the population is the Jewish faith? 1.8% in the United States, 0.2% in the world. So they're getting these Nobel Peace Prizes at a rate 100 times more often than they would. So if you say that God is an illusion that interferes with reason and science, I just proved the opposite. You didn't have anything to say about that one. I'm starting to win the argument a little bit. So, then, tonight, yes, you say, yeah, baloney, it's just starting, it'll never end. So tonight I said, well, he has previously used the Epicurean critique of religion. And I said, can you go ahead and rephrase that for me tonight, son, because I'm going to Toastmasters and I want to be able to have pertinent information. And without even referring to it, he said, oh, sure, Dad. First of all, in regards to God ending suffering in the world, if he is able but not willing, he's malicious. If he is willing but unable, he is not omnipotent. If he is both willing and able, then why is there suffering? And if he is neither willing nor able, why call him God? He has this memorized. He just right off the top of his head. I had to write it down. I couldn't memorize it for tonight's speech. I've got quite a case here, guys. This is not going to be an easy battle. So, if he is able but not willing, he is malicious. That implies that there's no free will. But we know that there is free will. Free will allows you to choose bad choices. Not all of us are going to choose all the time to be completely sober and work out every day and eat what's healthy for us. We all know that occasionally we're tempted to drink too much, to not work out, and to eat a lot of crappy food. So, if you have free will, people have the right to make bad decisions. If he is willing but unable, he's not omnipotent. Well, we impose our own ideas on what God is. And personally, if I were God, I wouldn't want to know everything that's going to happen for the rest of my life. That's like playing a video game and having no consequences for failing. Have you guys ever played a video game that was too easy and you got tired of it and you just gave it up? And then you played one that was too difficult and you got killed all the time and you gave it up? You want something that makes you feel like it has a small amount of consequences for making mistakes, but gives you some feeling of accomplishment when you actually do something good. God can do the same thing if he chooses. He can wear blinders, he can put on earmuffs, he can do something so that life is a surprise for him. If he is both willing and able, where cometh suffering? Well, guys, we have to reconcile faith with evolution. And evolution means those who aren't the smartest or the strongest or most industrious or the most civilized don't get to have as many children. Those who are end up winning in the evolutionary game. If there wasn't some suffering, if some people didn't suffer, then there'd be no evolution. We'd still be crawling around on the bottom of an ocean floor somewhere. I don't think that's 24 minutes. I think you're just trying to get me to shut up. Can you re-examine that, Mr.
I don't
Timer?
know. They're telling me different things, so you know what? Just turn it off.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I didn't want to be timers.
I'm only halfway done. Yes, I love that reaction.
Yeah.
Okay, so
My mother called.
I think I've handled what I think is the Epicurean critique and what my solution is. Then he comes up to me and says, what about the Crusades? What about the Inquisition? What about child abuse? The church has done evil. And I said, yes, it has. And actually, if you look at Matthew 7:16, Jesus warns us about that. He said, beware the false prophets. Beware the prophets that come in sheep's clothing and really the ravenous wolves. You will know the fruit, you will know the quality of the tree by its fruit. A corrupt tree does not produce good fruit. A good tree does not produce corrupt fruit. You have to examine these prophets and figure out what they're trying to accomplish and what the results are, and that's how you judge if they've done well. The people who were in charge of the Crusades, the people who were in charge of the Inquisition, those who abused our children were false prophets. But you don't condemn the entire church for some evil that's been done by some individuals when the grand majority of what the church does is far beneficial for our society. The good outweighs the bad. We all know about some bad presidents of the United States. Do we throw out our republic because we've had some bad presidents? No. The institution is worth saving. So, seventh critique. How moral is a God that threatens eternal damnation? If you make a mistake and you get to go to hell for all eternity, is that really fair? And I said, well, I've stood before you in other speeches and I've talked about punishment and how it's the role and the function and the necessity of a father, a good father, to lovingly discipline their child to give them a small amount of pain to prevent a future larger pain. And I used an example of one of my sons who was about to put a fork into a wall and electrocute himself. And I ran on over there and spanked him, because I'd rather have him not do that next week when I'm not there and kill himself. And am I sadistic? Am I enjoying the pain that I give to my son? No. I love him. I want to save his life. I'd rather have him remember not to do that with a small amount of physical pain than to have death the next week. I think that's what all of us know is an essential part of being a good father. You put down a line and you don't let your child cross it without consequences, or you end up having a son who's a mass killer who goes to school and kills 17 people. 19 out of the last 20 mass murderers did not have fathers who were correcting them at home. 19 of them. And you have a dad there who can show you right from wrong, who can guide you, it makes a difference. And that's what God is doing for us with religion. He's not trying to send us to hell. He wants to deter us from going to hell by threatening it. It's like prison. Hardly any of us go to prison, but none of us want to go there, so we obey the laws of our country. We try to speed only 10 or 15 miles per hour over the speed limit, because otherwise we'll get a ticket that we don't want to pay. And if we go too far above that, we might end up having community service. And if we go way far above that, we might end up in jail. There's no consequences. People keep going over the line. So God tries to save us by giving us some consequences or threatening some consequences. I spent most of my life being deterred from evil by the consequences of going to hell. When I had that vision recently, it was like a switch from the dark side to the good side. I started wanting to go to church again. I'd always gone out of obligation, a sense of duty, and I'd argued with God at church. In fact, I would leave the masses and argue in the car with all of my kids about what he had just told me through the priest. And I said, I agree with this and I disagree with that. And it took me a long time to figure out that's what faith is. Faith is examining and wrestling with these issues. In fact, that's what Isaac did in the Bible. Isaac, or I think it was Abraham or Isaac, wrestled with God, wrestled with an angel, because he didn't want to follow what he was being told. And he is one of the heroes of the Bible.
Isaac.
It was Isaac. He's one of the heroes of the Bible. Not because he blindly followed what God told him, but he wrestled with it. And that wrestling is how we become faithful. So after that vision I had of peace and love, I actually started getting some peace and love in my life. And I'm getting close to the end here, and I appreciate your guys' patience. I'd like to end with something that my son came to me and said, Dad, I don't believe in the miracles in the Bible. And I said, really? Why not? Well, Lazarus wasn't risen from the dead. It's only referred to once in the Bible. And I said, well, does that mean you believe in all the other New Testament miracles that are repeated in all four Bibles? But no, I don't believe in those either. I said, okay, well, if you don't believe in any miracles, how are you an expert on religious miracles if you don't believe in any of them? And this came in real interesting because about 4 weeks ago, my daughter Jessica was at the 23rd week in her pregnancy. And she came home and said, Dad, we looked at the ultrasound, we had an expert, they couldn't find a penis, it's going to be a daughter. And I said, that's great, is it healthy? Yes. Well, that's all that matters. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for you. This is great. I'm going to have a little daughter in August. That's wonderful. And then I turned to Kiefer and jokingly said, well, Kiefer, I guess you didn't pray hard enough to get that little penis to show up in the ultrasound. And Kiefer laughed and said, I don't care one way or the other. And then my wife went and started sewing all of this stuff for a girl. She spent hundreds of hours sewing all of these blankets and doing all this. And I said, are you sure you don't want to do that in primary colors? I mean, you don't know for sure that it's going to be a girl at this point. It could end up being a boy, especially if we pray a little bit hard. She said, oh, that's just a horrible comment. You're a misogynist. I can't believe you said that. It's 100% that it's going to be a girl. And then my daughter, Caitlin, turned to me and said, yeah, you're just trying to take the wind out of her sails. It's going to be a girl. And I said, well, we'll see, won't we? Oh, it's 100% going to be a girl. That's what the technician said. It's 100%. I've said, well, we'll see if a miracle happens or not. So 2 weeks ago, my daughter came to the brigantine and she passed over the new ultrasound, and my wife said, so it's still a girl, right? I've got hundreds of hours, I've got all these great blankets, I've got everything. And what do you think she said? She looked over and said, oh no, there's a little penis. It's right there. And I turned to it, and I turned to Kiefer and said, way to go, Kiefer! And we high-fived. I said, I told you prayer works. Not because I wanted it, but because this was evidence of a miracle. A miracle. And I went back and I talked to my sister Caitlin, or my daughter Caitlin. I said, Caitlin, you're getting married in the church and you haven't been going recently. Maybe you should go back to church. Maybe this was a sign from God that you need to go back to the church. This wasn't done for me. This wasn't done because I'm a misogynist. This was done as a sign for you to go back to church. And I looked at my son and I said, this is a miracle. He said, that wasn't a miracle, Dad. And I said, you wouldn't recognize a miracle if it came up and kissed you on the lips. This is a miracle. And you need to get confirmed, no matter how much I have to pay you to do it.
Oh my God.
Fellow Toastmasters.